Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Real Talks. I'm your host, David Steele. I hope everybody is having an outstanding weekend, and they did partake in going to see the newest film out that just dropped, started the blockbuster season, and that was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Um, and we'll be talking more about the opening weekend numbers and everything else tomorrow on the show. And so I actually just did a spoiler cast with Matthew Anderson. It is on the channel now. You can go to my Twitter, it's on there, his Twitter, and a bunch of other places you can see that. But that's this week. That was for that. So, what I have said in the past, and we're going to be continuing today, is I said we were going to be doing a Mission Impossible rewatch series. And so we just about, I don't know, a week ago when Paramount dropped their new footage at Comic Con, it was probably more like 2 weeks ago. Um, they just dropped 20 minutes of brand new footage at Comic Con. And I had basically said that we were going to do a rewatch series and go through every single film, good or bad, leading up to January 12th. It was the 14th, and then Paramount pushed it up 2 days. And so today I'm going to be, I'm going to be doing Mission Impossible 2. So this one was a little backstory about it, okay? So this was the first film that was done under the Cruise Wagner production. And this is when he first started to become a producer for these films. And as the franchise went on, obviously later and later and more in depth, he got a lot more involved. And so this came out in 2000. And I can't even believe that was 23 years ago, guys. But yeah, it was 23 years ago. And so this actually did pretty well for the time. So opening weekend, it made $57 million. Now, obviously, that's minuscule today, post-pandemic and everything else. But at that point, it was pretty big. Don't forget, Mission Impossible was a huge success because of a number of reasons I talked about in the first video. And actually, it ended up being almost a quarter or a little over a quarter of the total gross worldwide. Okay, it made $550 million, which was huge back in the day, right? So and this actually, adjusted for inflation today, it's about 366. But more importantly, so and we always talk about budgets and everything else. This had a $120 million budget, and it made 4.6 times its budget. So this was definitely considered a success financially, okay, for the studio and Paramount. As far as film goers, we look back on it now, I would even consider this to be the weakest one of the bunch, just because of a lot of different things, and I'll get into those in a couple minutes. But what it's always fascinating because when we look back at films like this, for example, 20 some odd years later, you go, "Oh my God, how did they get away with that?" Or, "Oh my gosh, they were able to say that." And I gotta say that it was mind blowing to see some of the stuff and some of the dialogue. And I actually verbatim wrote it down because I wanted to tell you guys about this because there's no way that this stuff would have been able to have been said today. Way, okay. Anyways, so this was directed by John Woo. Okay, and John Woo is basically known or was basically known for his feature films, action films, and whatever else. And he had actually, he's most known for the 1997 film Face Off, right, with John Travolta and Christian Slater, and that was one that I really enjoyed. Frankly, it was a little out there and far fetched, but it was fun. It was good. It was cool to see John Travolta as a villain. Yeah, and I really enjoyed it. So a couple of you, because of the success of Face Off, and because of that, you know, um, well done action style of film, they Paramount signed him on, and he did Mission Impossible 2. So, let's talk about there are a number of different things and factors here. One of them being is as we move through this franchise, okay, I'm going to talk to you guys about a number of different things, such as, for example, okay, Vin Rames and Tom Cruise are the only two people, okay, that have been in every single film in some capacity. I mean, Tom Cruise obviously is the star of the film, but even if you go back, I mean, Vin Rames is, he was introduced in the first one, and he still had a part in this to play that was okay. But yeah, so let's talk about the cast for a minute, because this was an interesting cast that came to be. So of course you have Vin Rames there on the left, okay. You have Tom Cruise. You have Thaddeus Newton, who was, not she was known, okay, but she wasn't, um, how shall I say, box office material. Okay, I mean, she was a name that I think a lot of people was wondering, who is this? Who is this woman? And so I think that, you know, so that being said, you had Thaddeus Newton, okay, and you also had that gentleman there on the right who plays the villain. We'll get to him in a couple of minutes. Is um, Doug Ray Scott, and he plays Sean Ambrose, and he plays the villain in this film. And so, it's one of those things where it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. And so I think that, yeah, it just, you're always going to have one bad film in a franchise, always. And I think this was going to be the bad film. Um, Already I'm talking negatively about it, even though it was critically, it did a lot of money. And that's the thing. You can have a film, do a lot of money, and still be a film that's not so good. Anyway, so those are the four major players of the game. We have other co-stars and proxies for the villains, everything else, but those are the four big names that are in the film. Um, so something else I'm going to be talking to you about is the different secretaries, the different superiors in this film, because as we go through this franchise, we're going to see a number of different um, secretaries of the different, Mission Impossible branch. So in this particular film, and it was always interesting, okay, to see who is going to be the next secretary, right? So in this particular case, it's Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins is playing the the secretary to actually tell Hunt what his mission is. And I mean, it's only a couple of scenes, okay, but he was good for what it was. And when you're able to get a name like Anthony Hopkins coming into your franchise, now that gives it a little bit of credibility, right? I mean, Tom Cruise is always going to be the name, but I was gonna equate it to like Winter Soldier bringing in Robert Redford, but yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, you can almost do that. Um, but yeah, so they bring Anthony Hopkins in, and he is the secretary or the superior in this case, and he basically says, that he has a job for Ethan and everything else. But when we begin the film, and this just goes to show you John Woo's um, creativity. I'm going to talk about some of these shots in a couple minutes, but this one in particular, how do you start out a Mission Impossible film, right? It's difficult because we haven't caught up with the characters in a minute, and what is Ethan doing, and what is everybody else doing. So what does he do? We go to what we believe, or what could be distinguishes like the Grand Canyon or rock climbing. And so Ethan Hunt, of course, he likes a challenge, right? And so he's out well, we don't know exactly the exact place, but we see Tom Cruise rock climbing. And, knowing him, my guess is that he told John, hey, look, I don't want any ropes or strings or anything else. I mean, of course, you can tell. And by the way it was shot was spectacular because they had to shoot it from a helicopter, right? I mean, it was one of those things where you're so high up that this isn't CGI, guys. I mean, this is the start of, what we know today. um, and, it's just amazing when you see what we have and the durability and the dexterity and the strength, the course, and just it's mind blowing. And of course, he makes a jump, he gets to the top of the cliff, he's handed, or they shoot down a missile like projectile, and it has these awesome. I would love to get a pair of these at some point. Oakley sunglasses, and it's that's always the catch too. It's how are they going to give him the mission? It's not that he gets the mission; it's that how is he going to get the mission? So in this particular one, it's via sunglasses, and it's optical, and so should your mission, should you choose to accept it, is. And so the plot of this film, and this is where we really start to go into it, and the plot of this film, okay, as was stated earlier, okay, is Ethan has to basically try and recover something known as Chimera. And so how does he do that, right? So in the beginning of the film, I'm not going to go beat by beat because either you've seen this film or you're going to go see this film or you know of this film. So basically, we have a doctor that developed this, and it's interesting watching. It was fascinating because as I was watching this film, I was thinking of the pandemic, and so Chimera is this world-ending disease, and Ethan Hunt and his team basically have to go and stop the outbreak of this worldwide pandemic disease. And so it's fascinating to see. So, we are introduced to the doctor early on and everything else. So I have a couple of notes here. So as I was saying, once again, getting back to Hopkins, it was a small little part. He was really good. And we're going to go through different secretaries as we go through this franchise. So a couple of these things. So John Woo, as I said, is known for action, right? Face Off. He's done several other films. This is how he starts out, okay, by putting Ethan on a cliff, okay? And so once he gets a mission and he starts to, so then he goes and he talks to Anthony Hopkins' character, okay? He gets the details of the mission. So we're going to meet this thief. And this thief is Thaddeus Newton. And the kicker is that she's going to go back to this guy and steal this stuff. At the end of the day, this is really a heist movie, but it's an action heist movie. So some of the lines. So one thing I really noticed going forward with this movie is that John Woo used slow motion quite a few times in this film. And, it was one of those things where the first couple times it was effective. And then after the third or fourth time, it became very dull. I didn't care for it at all because it was you're taking away from the gravitas of it. And so we actually in one particular, so we have somebody else here who plays a small part, okay? He's in a cat. I mean, it's interesting to look back 23 years later, and he looks back, and Brendan Gleeson is the owner of this company that I'm referring to as Biotech. And so he that they are the ones that make um, this chimera. And so that being said, okay, um, he plays a small part, but it's not bad. I mean, he's in a couple of scenes. But getting back to Wu, so he used slow motion several times, and that was something that really was bothersome. And that being said, the times that he did use it and it was effective, it worked. Okay. Um, so one of the things he does do well, okay, in this film is visually speaking, he's very good at certain points. Okay. And here are two, shots of this that I think are really indicative of that. And that's showing, you know, so right now this is the scene where basically they are at he's at the lab and he's looking at some stuff, and it's a worldwide map. Okay, projector comes on, and we have his eyes light up, and his whole face is kind of surrounded in darkness, which was really cool. Um, and I mean, just the look on his face tells everything you need to know, and he's very serious about it and everything else. But I thought visually that was stunning, and just how it was done. Um, and the other real shot, and this was in the third act, but I think it's one of the most memorable shots of the film. Okay, is when you see this white pigeon, okay, this white bird fly in through the. So this is where he blows up the door, and you see this white pigeon wall just fly through, and just and then he comes walking, and this is one of the scenes where he uses slow motion, and it's effective to a certain extent, but by this time he's done it so much that it kind of takes away from it. Um, so when he actually breaks into the facility to um, get the chimera and destroy the chimera, okay, um, the jumping down sequence reminded me straight out of the first film, and they had only a small window, and they were able to do it. I didn't, so it seemed a little repetitive to me. I thought they could have done something else. Um, so that was something that really kind of bothered me. Now it's fascinating because with $120 million budget, you think they would have done more. Okay, this was all shot in Sydney. Okay, and that's interesting that they only. I mean, because if you think of Mission Impossible movies today, right? They're spy movies. You think of multiple locales across the world, whether it's Paris or Budapest or Rome or, I don't know, Dublin or London. Okay. This was all shot in one country. And that was an interesting thing. And by the way, some of the shots of the Opera House were spectacular. Some of the establishing shots were beautiful. You got a wide shot of, the Opera House and everything about it. But, you know, it just I think that's one thing that really was lacking from this film, to be absolutely honest, is we didn't go across the world. Okay. Mission Impossible is supposed to be, clue here, you travel to here. You go here, then you go over there. And I think when you're staying in one place, I think it gets very mundane. And because they are supposed to be super spies after all, right? So, that being said, so, but when he was jumping in, it seemed very like it was a repeat of the first film. Um, but as I said, so this shot here is visually amazing for him. Um, that being said, the other thing that I really didn't care for, and I don't have a picture of this, so I'll just tell you guys, is in all of these Mission Impossible films, whether it's the first one all the way to the last one, at least once in every single film, we talk about um, the masks, right? And whether it was at the end of the original Mission Impossible with the first one, or was it whatever it is, we always have masks that hide somebody's identity. And this was the first film where they actually used the voice too. I mean, well, not the first. I shouldn't say that because that's not true. But so you have the mask and you have the voice. They used it here 6 times throughout the movie. 6 times. And I thought that was I was counting. Literally, I was counting. Way too much. And that being said, it took away from the gravitas of it, right? Because you master disguise, supposed to figure out who it is. Didn't work for me at all. Yeah, I mean, so just a couple other things I want to talk about real quick is the script. This had to be in, I'm going to pull up the writer's name here. Okay, Bruce Geller, Ronald D. Moore, and Brandon Braga. Okay, they were the 3 writers, or the main writers, that are credited for this film. This had to be one of the worst written scripts I've ever seen in my life. And I don't like criticizing people. I mean, we're 23 years out and everything else, but that had to be one of the worst scripts and misogynistic scripts I've ever seen in my life. So I'm going to read you a couple of these verbatim. This is right out of the movie. And so there's actually one scene here where, so I'm going to see if I can find this. Okay. So it was one of the scenes in the film was where basically that let's see. Okay, sorry guys. So one of the scenes in the film was when the villains were in the room. Okay, so these guys were, now this is actually when they're about to meet Gleason. So, but you can picture it for another thing. So they're actually talking. And so going back to let's start with the Anthony Hopkins scene. So this scene here, when Ethan is speaking to the secretary, and he basically says, this is a direct quote, by the way. Okay, to go to bed with a woman, to go to bed, a woman has all the training she needs. She lies. This isn't mission difficult. This is mission impossible. This should be a walk in the park. Now, I think that what really offended me about that was it's not mission difficult. It's mission impossible. That's fine. It's to go to bed with a woman. She has all the training she needs. Like what? I can't even believe that is even said today. There's no way that could have been said. And furthermore, it was a really insulting line. And I'm shocked that nobody picked up on that back then. Like, whoa, that was blatant misogynistic. And I went, wow. There's another scene where, and this goes back to, once again, so the villains were in the room. This is a different scene with the villains, but this is when the proxy, okay, this guy in the back behind the main villain there, basically was really curious about why Thada Newton's Naya is her name, why Naya came back after all these years. And the exact quote from the movie said, she wasn't exactly gagging for it 6 months ago when she left you. Like, oh my God. How, I was blown away. Like, and they actually let this through, and they actually allowed them to say this. And I don't know. I just couldn't. So okay, fine. Um, and then later on, okay. I mean, this just tells you how bad the film is from a story point of view, right? Because this is just it's time after time after time. So one of the final ones is this: women, they're like monkeys. Women are like monkeys. They are. They won't do anything until they swing from one branch to the next, another. Wow. Um, just a horrible, horrible script. Anyways, I had to bring that out because that was incredibly, you know, we would if they actually came out and tried to write this or say this stuff today, they'd have been thrown off the set, or the writers would have been thrown off the project. But getting back to the film, okay, all in all, it was more. So what ends up happening, obviously, is Nia takes the Chimera, and they have to go save. They have to go hunt down Sean. Okay, pictured there in front, and stop this deal from going down, which this is the deal, okay, in which he and Gleason are standing there. One of those is the actual Chimera because they took it from her blood, and the other one is the antidote. And so Sean is basically blackmailing him and saying, look, I want stock options, this, and this. And Ethan comes in and saves the day, And there's a big, so once this happens, okay, and so at which point his proxy, okay, this guy back here, and he cuts his finger off, unnecessarily because, he's questioning him. He gets wrapped up. And so he gets, another mask is put on and he's, taped shut. And he basically shoots his proxy, Sean does, without knowing it. The whole third act, okay, was really drawn out. It was really drawn out. I mean, once this deal does not go down, they finally get to transfer, okay. Then Ethan and Sean have this battle for probably about the better part of 20 minutes over what's a really cool, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a really cool motorcycle chase. And, cars flipping, explosions, gunshots. And once again, in going back to the slow motion, okay, John Woo uses slow motion when you see that, whether he's jumping over him or a multitude of different ways. And I thought it got to be very repetitive, very cumbersome, and very drawn out. And I didn't care for it whatsoever. All of that being said, we all know what happens. Okay. Anybody who's seen the film or knows about the film, basically, Ethan saves the day. They save Nia, and that's it. But it's one of those things where when you watch the film, after the repetitiveness, after the time after time after time after time, you get turned off real quick. And I think that was something that really turned me off, frankly. I mean, I had seen the film, but I hadn't seen it in many, many, many years because of how bad it was. And I forgot how bad it was, whether it was the script, whether it was repetitiveness of such, whether it was, the villain or whatever it was. And I just, obviously, I didn't care for the film. Now, that all being said, Mark, it did make a lot of money. Okay. It did, make $500 million at the worldwide box office. And but when you look back in the grand scheme of things, at the end of the day, this film is always in the bottom, inevitably. If not the bottom, the second to the last one, because it just never worked. I think Wu got a lot of great stuff done with Mission Impossible, or with Face Off rather, and he wanted to try and capitalize on that. And that being said, he didn't. It didn't work, and I think that when you have a director like that, and he tries to do it again, it's harder. It's more difficult. Even even if the cast is different, okay. Even if the cast is different, and I think that you know, look, this film for what it is, it may be a success um, out there, but I guarantee you, as far as box office, it's one of the lower tier films. Um, I mean, there's a lot of other things. That's not to say. I want to say something too. This film had its high points. It really did. Like the visuals sometimes, as I said, were some of the greatest visuals I've seen in a long time. Okay? Whether it's this shot, okay, with Ethan's eyes, or whether it's, I mean, this is the shot I think everybody remembers from this film, is that white pigeon flying through with the darkness and the fire, and it just looked really, really cool. And in slow motion, it does look cool. But that was all it had. And I think that when you have a script the way it was, and it just, and that's why they didn't ask him to come back. I mean, and it is what it is. I mean, um, so yeah, I mean, Mission Impossible is, this is always going to be the one on the bottom, and I think it's a shame. We're getting bigger and better, but it's gonna, it's only gonna go up from here, guys. This one, that's the good news. It's only gonna go up from here. So, you know, and that's great to know. So that is Mission Impossible 2. Um, so couple of things right off the top. So I am gonna be doing. I will watch Mission Impossible 3 very soon, and I will get that out to you guys very soon. Um, that being said, we have a lot of stuff coming up on the channel. Um, Earlier this week, um, Matthew Anderson and Matthew actually came back and he joined me for May's perfect movie, which was Empire Strikes Back. And we talked all about that. I just did a 40th anniversary, and I'll put that up there in the little corner there for you guys, right there, for Return of the Jedi. And I actually went to go see Return of the Jedi in the theater. And I mean, look, I've seen the movie like 50, 60 times. It was a different experience. I mean, not one time did I want to get up and go use a restroom or get popcorn or whatever. And, you know, so, but yeah, so I went to go see that also. And Matthew came back on Saturday, just yesterday, and did the spoiler cast for Guardians of the Galaxy 3. So, that is out right now on the channel. Okay. You guys can go, check that out. I'll put that another little link up there in the top corner. We have, a bunch of stuff. So I am going to be recording. I said I was going to do both. I have all the notes for the Untouchables. I'm going to go record. So in about, we'll call it like 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, I am going to be recording Mob Mondays for the Patreon. So if you guys want to come back and join me for that, we're going to be doing the 1987 film The Untouchables. Kevin Costner and, you know, Robert De Niro and Andy Garcia and Sean Connery, directed by actually the gentleman who did the first Mission Impossible, and Brian De Palma. Um, that was a blast to watch again. And then tomorrow, after the show, I will be doing Training Day. So both both films will be up for you guys. And by the way, speaking of Patreon, if you guys want to go support me on Patreon, all you got to do is head on over to patreon.com/Real Talks. There are two levels there. One is $5. Okay. That is Mob Mondays. That's what I was just referring to a moment ago. The other one is $10. That is going to be Rewatch Wednesdays. That is going to be basically, you know, these are films that I've watched that I haven't seen in a while, and I want to sit down and rewatch them, give my analysis on everything else. $10 a month, guys. That's it. It's very very low tier stuff. There's also a join button there on the channel if you'd like to help me out there. I know there have been a couple people that have stopped in. Please, guys, if you stop in, you see something you might please, like that ticker says, hit that like and subscribe button, because that is the only way this stuff gets out to everybody. There is so much stuff coming up on the channel this year. Okay, we have more perfect movies coming up for June. We are going to be doing The Dark Knight. Okay, so stay tuned for that. We've got a ton of spoiler casts coming up for you. The first one is up on the channel right now for Guardians 3. We're going to be doing things like Fast 10, Across the Spider-Verse, The Flash, Transformers, Mission Impossible, Oppenheimer. We've got everything lined up for you guys for the rest of the summer. And then the show. And the show is something that I'm bringing to you guys on a daily basis. And, so I'd love for you to come join me. Please follow me on Twitter. So that is going to basically, that is my Twitter handle. Okay. I'm always on there talking about movies or, responding to movies, hosting spaces. I'm in spaces, movie spaces. And please come join me for that, because that is, that's where it's at. And you're going to see a lot of stuff there. And yeah, so like I said, a ton of stuff coming to you. You can't get this much stuff anywhere else for free ever. And that's why I asked you guys if you could come please support me, because look, I know times are tough right now. And I know that, everybody's crunching for dollars and cents. And that's why I wanted to make this as affordable and convenient as possible. So, anyways, guys, that's it for today. That's it for right now. As I said, come back, join me at 5 o'clock for the Untouchables. And okay, so do the 3 things you need to do: be safe, have a good weekend, and be careful. I'm David Steele, and you have been watching Real Talks. Bye bye, guys.